The last time I tried to warn my daughter, she rolled her eyes so hard, I thought she might actually laugh in my face. "Mom, not everyone is trying to scam me," Brinley snapped, while adjusting the diamond ring on her finger. "You always think the worst about people." I looked past her shoulder at Nathan standing in the kitchen doorway, smiling too calmly for a man being questioned about his finances. That was the moment I stopped talking. Not because I stopped loving my daughter, but because I realized she would have to watch her perfect life fall apart before she could finally see the man standing beside her. And by then, it was already too late. If you've ever tried to protect someone you love only to be pushed away, I'd really like to hear your story in the comments. And if this story touches your heart in any way, don't forget to like and subscribe. I always read your comments, especially from those of you watching late at night like I used to. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I used to believe that if you raised a child with enough love, honesty, and sacrifice, they would eventually trust your instincts when life became complicated. At 62 years old, I finally understood how wrong that idea could be. I lived alone in a small brick house outside Columbus, Ohio. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen cabinets were older than my daughter, and the hardwood floors still creaked in the hallway, no matter how many times I had them repaired. But it was peaceful, predictable, safe. After my husband died 12 years earlier from a sudden heart attack, I learned how to survive quietly. I worked as an accountant for almost 30 years at a family-owned construction company. Numbers became my comfort after grief destroyed everything else. Numbers didn't lie. People did, especially charming people. Brinley used to laugh when I said things like that. "Mom, you sound like someone who watches crime documentaries all day." Maybe I did. Or maybe age simply teaches you how to recognize danger hidden behind a nice smile. Brinley was 34, beautiful, confident, and so determined to build a life bigger than the one she grew up in. She worked in marketing for a healthcare company downtown and carried herself like a woman who had spent years proving she belonged in rooms where people underestimated her. I admired that about her. But somewhere along the way, confidence had hardened into something else. Pride. She hated feeling judged, hated feeling corrected even more. Especially by me. The first time she mentioned Nathan Mercer, we were having lunch at a little cafe near her office. "He's different," she said while stirring cream into her coffee. "Not immature like the guys I dated before." I remember smiling. That sounds promising. "He owns part of an investment consulting company." "Owns part of it?" I asked. Something like that. That should have been the first sign. Brinley usually knew every detail about the people she dated. But with Nathan, her answers always felt strangely vague, as if she were repeating information instead of understanding it. A week later, she invited me to dinner so I could meet him. Nathan arrived carrying an expensive bottle of wine and wearing the kind of smile that instantly makes people lower their guard. Tall, well-dressed, calm voice, confident handshake. "Mrs. Shaw," he said warmly. "I've heard so much about you." "That's usually dangerous," I replied. He laughed immediately, too quickly, like a man trained to charm. During dinner, he complimented everything. The roast chicken, the house, even the old curtains over my kitchen sink. "Brinley says you handled everything yourself after your husband passed," he said. "That's impressive. Sometimes you do what you have to do." I respect that. Most mothers probably would have loved hearing those words. But something about Nathan felt rehearsed. Not fake exactly. Practiced. There's a difference. I watched him carefully while Brinley talked about work. Nathan rarely shared anything concrete about himself unless directly asked. "So where is your office located?" I asked casually. "Mostly remote these days," he answered smoothly. "That must make taxes complicated." "A little. What kind of investments does your company handle?" "Oh, all kinds. Real estate, startups, Development opportunities, development opportunities. That phrase stayed in my head because it sounded intentionally broad. People who truly understand business usually explain things simply. People hiding something explain nothing at all. Brinley didn't notice. Or maybe she didn't want to. Every time Nathan spoke, she looked at him like he had walked straight out of some romantic movie she'd been waiting her whole life to live in. I tried to ignore the uneasiness crawling through me. Then Nathan said something strange. My father actually worked construction for years, he told me. That's why I respect hardworking people. I nodded politely. But later that evening, when Brinley stepped outside to take a phone call, Nathan wandered into the living room and glanced at the framed photograph of my late husband in his work uniform. Blue-collar men had it rough back then, he said. Back then? Something about the wording bothered me. How old is your father? I asked. Nathan paused, only half a second. 72. I did the math automatically in my head. If his father was 72, then he wasn't old enough to have worked construction in the era Nathan had implied. Tiny inconsistency. But tiny inconsistencies matter. After they left, I sat awake in my recliner replaying the evening in my mind. I remembered every answer Nathan gave. Every pause. Every redirect. Every smile. And the more I thought about him, the more uncomfortable I became. 3 days later, Brinley called me while driving home from work. Nathan thinks we should start looking at houses together. I nearly dropped the dish I was drying. Houses, relax, Mom. We're not buying tomorrow. But you're thinking about it. We're serious. How serious? There was a pause. Then she laughed softly. He's probably proposing soon. I closed my eyes. Brinley, do you really know him well enough for that? There it was. Silence. The dangerous kind. You already don't like him, she said quietly. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Honey, I'm just asking questions. Because that's what you do. You question everything. Sometimes questions protect people, or push them away. The call ended awkwardly after that, but my instincts refused to settle down. A few days later, I was at the grocery store when I unexpectedly ran into Nathan near the frozen food aisle. He smiled instantly. Mrs. Shaw. Nathan. We made small talk for a moment before another man walked past and greeted him. Hey, Nate, the man said casually. How's the development business going? Development business. Not investment consulting. Nathan answered quickly. Busy as always. The man kept walking. I stood there staring at Nathan. Development business. Investment consulting. 2 different stories. Nathan smiled calmly, but I noticed something cold flicker behind his eyes for the first time. Just for 1 second. Then it vanished. You know how people simplify careers differently, he said lightly. Maybe. But honest people don't usually need multiple versions of their lives. That night, I pulled out my old accounting notebooks from the closet. Not because I planned to interfere. Not yet. But because 30 years of balancing books had taught me one thing. If something feels wrong at the beginning, it rarely becomes right later. And for the first time since meeting Nathan Mercer, I was truly afraid for my daughter. 2 weeks after I met Nathan Mercer, Brinley invited us both to dinner again. Looking back now, I think she already sensed the tension growing between us and hoped another evening together would fix it. Instead, it only made everything worse. I spent the entire afternoon cooking. Pot roast, mashed potatoes, green beans with bacon the way Brinley liked them as a little girl. I even baked the peach cobbler my husband used to beg me to make every summer. Some habits of motherhood never leave you, even when your child is old enough to wound you with a single sentence. Brinley arrived first that evening carrying a bouquet of grocery store flowers. For the table, she said quickly before walking inside. Nathan came a few minutes later, wearing another expensive-looking jacket and carrying another bottle of wine that probably cost more than my electric bill. "Mrs. Shaw," he said warmly, "you're spoiling us." "I was raised to feed people properly," I answered. He smiled. Brinley noticed immediately that my tone wasn't overly friendly. "Mom," she warned softly. "Just one word." But it carried embarrassment inside it, as if I were the difficult one. Dinner started pleasantly enough. Nathan told funny stories about traveling for work. Brinley laughed constantly. Every time he touched her hand, she glowed like a teenager instead of a 34-year-old woman with a mortgage and retirement account. I tried to focus on eating, tried to ignore the voice in my head warning me something was wrong. But eventually I asked the question anyway. So I said carefully, "How long have you been with your company?" Nathan dabbed his mouth with a napkin before answering. "A few years now." "What's the company called again?" "Mercer Development Group." I looked up slowly. "Development Group, not investment consulting." Brinley jumped in immediately. "They handle different types of investments, Mom." Nathan nodded smoothly. "Mostly commercial development." I took a sip of water. "That sounds risky in this economy." "It can be, but high risk creates high reward." The answer sounded polished, empty. "How many employees?" Nathan smiled slightly. "We keep operations lean." Another non-answer. I noticed Brinley shift uncomfortably in her chair. "Mom," she said lightly, "you're interrogating him. I'm making conversation." "No," she replied with a forced laugh. "You're auditing him." Nathan chuckled. "It's okay. I admire cautious people." But I noticed something important. His smile never reached his eyes anymore when he looked at me. Not after the grocery store. Not after he realized I remembered details. I cut another piece of roast slowly. "So, where is your office located? We rotate between locations? Do you own property? A few investments here and there?" "What kind?" Brinley sighed loudly. "Oh my God." I looked at her. "What, you always do this? Do what you act like everyone is hiding something?" Nathan leaned back calmly, like a man enjoying a tennis match. I kept my voice even. "I'm simply trying to understand the man my daughter plans to marry." Brinley froze. Nathan glanced toward her. "Marry?" he asked softly, pretending surprise. Brinley smiled nervously. "Well, eventually." Nathan took her hand immediately. "I certainly hope so." Perfect timing. Too perfect. I watched him carefully. There are people who speak emotionally because they feel deeply. And there are people who speak emotionally because they understand the effect emotions have on others. Nathan belonged to the second group. After dinner, Brinley helped me carry dishes into the kitchen, while Nathan stepped outside to take a phone call. The moment the back door closed, I turned toward her. "Brinley." She immediately stiffened. "No, I haven't even said anything yet, because I already know where this is going." I lowered my voice. "Honey, I need you to slow down with this man." Her face hardened instantly. "There it is. I'm serious." "So am I. You barely know him?" "I know enough." "Do you?" I asked quietly. She crossed her arms. "Yes? What exactly does he do?" "He told you." "No." He gave vague answers. "That's your opinion." Brinley listened to me carefully. I placed the dish towel down. "Any man discussing marriage and joint investments this early deserves questions. He's not using me. I didn't say he was. You implied it. Because I've seen people lose everything trusting charm over facts." She laughed bitterly. "You know what your problem is?" I stared at her. "You think because you survived hard things, everyone else is naive? That's not fair." "No, what's not fair is how you treat every person I care about like a criminal." "I'm trying to protect you." "I don't need protection." Her voice echoed through the kitchen. For a second, we both went silent. Then she shook her head slowly. This is exactly why I stopped telling you things. The words hit harder than I expected. You stopped trusting me a long time ago, she continued. You just don't realize it. I felt my throat tighten. Brinley. You want the truth? She interrupted. You can't stand that I've built a life bigger than yours. I actually stepped back. Not because I was angry, because I was stunned. Do you really believe that you hate that I take risks? You hate that I'm successful? You hate that I'm happy? No, I whispered. I'm afraid. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Actually rolled her eyes, like a teenager dismissing an annoying lecture. Mom, she said coldly, not everyone is trying to scam me. The back door opened behind us. Nathan walked in, and even though he pretended not to notice the tension, I knew immediately he had heard enough. He looked between us carefully. Everything okay? Brinley forced a smile. Fine. But Nathan studied my face for one long second, and in that moment, something shifted. He understood that I would never fully trust him. And I understood something too. Men like Nathan don't simply dislike suspicion. They remove it, politely, quietly, one relationship at a time. The driveways outside glistened with rain when they finally left that night. Brinley hugged me quickly, without warmth. Nathan smiled one last time before opening the passenger door for her. Good night, Mrs. Shaw. I nodded silently, but before getting into the car, he paused. You know, he said softly, Brinley talks about how strong you are. I didn't answer. He smiled again. But sometimes strength can look a lot like control to other people. Then he got into the car, and they drove away. I stood in my kitchen long after the headlights disappeared. Something cold settled deep in my chest. Not fear for myself. Fear for my daughter. Because for the first time, I realized Nathan wasn't just charming. He was strategic. And worse than that, Brinley was already defending him harder than she defended herself. That's when I knew I was beginning to lose her. After that dinner, the distance between Brinley and me didn't happen all at once. It happened slowly, quietly. Like watching a door close inch by inch until suddenly you realize you can no longer see inside the room. At first, it was little things. She stopped calling during her commute home from work, stopped sending me random photos of grocery store disasters or funny signs she passed on the highway. Those small habits disappear before relationships do. Most people don't notice that until it's too late. Then came the cancellations. Sorry, Mom. Busy week. Nathan planned something. Rain check, always polite, always short, and somehow colder every time. I told myself not to panic. Brinley was an adult. Adults get busy. Adults build lives outside their parents. But deep down, I knew this wasn't normal distance. This was intentional distance. And Nathan was standing right in the middle of it. One Sunday afternoon, I drove downtown to bring Brinley the lasagna she loved whenever she was stressed. I texted ahead first. No answer. Still, I went anyway. When I knocked, Nathan opened the door instead of Brinley. He smiled immediately. That same smooth smile. Mrs. Shaw. She home. She's resting. I glanced past him. I could hear the television on somewhere deeper inside the townhouse. I just brought food. That's thoughtful. But he didn't move aside. Not even an inch. Something about that tiny detail made my stomach tighten. I can give it to her myself, I said. Nathan hesitated just long enough for me to notice. Then he laughed softly. You know how she gets when work overwhelms her. She's been exhausted lately. I raised her, I replied calmly. I know how she gets. His smile flickered for half a second. Then Brinley's voice floated from inside. Nathan? I'm here, babe. A moment later, she appeared behind him wearing sweatpants and a messy bun. Normally, she would have hugged me immediately. This time, she looked irritated. Mom, you should have texted first. I did. Oh. She glanced at Nathan quickly before taking the casserole dish from my hands. Well, thanks. That was it. No invitation inside. No conversation. Just awkward silence hanging between us. I looked carefully at my daughter. There were faint shadows under her eyes I hadn't seen before. You okay? I asked softly. I'm fine. You look tired. People get tired, Mom. Nathan slipped his arm casually around her waist. She's been working too hard. The way he answered for her bothered me more than I can explain. I forced a small smile. Well, at least eat something besides takeout. Brinley nodded distractedly. Thanks. Then she stepped backward. Toward him. Toward the house. Toward the life I no longer recognized. The door closed gently in front of me, and I stood there holding nothing but empty air. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at my untouched tea. Maybe I should have let it go. Maybe I should have accepted that my daughter no longer wanted my opinions. But mothers notice things other people don't, like how Brinley had stopped wearing the gold bracelet her father gave her before he died. Like how she now hesitated before answering basic questions. Like how every conversation suddenly sounded rehearsed. 3 weeks later, she called me unexpectedly. Guess what she said brightly? I immediately became suspicious. What Nathan and I are thinking about buying a house. I nearly stopped breathing. A house, not immediately, but soon. Brinley, hear me out first. I closed my eyes. My townhouse has almost doubled in value since I bought it. Nathan thinks if I sell now, we can put a huge down payment on something bigger together. Together. That word can destroy people financially faster than almost anything else. How long have you two even been discussing this a while, and whose name would be on the house silence? Then came the sigh. Mom. No answer me. Both of ours. I pressed my fingers against my forehead. Honey, please don't combine assets before marriage. Oh my God, I'm serious. You're always serious. Because real life is serious. No, she snapped. You're paranoid. I inhaled slowly, trying to stay calm. You barely know this man's finances. You barely know him. I know enough to ask questions. Nathan is helping me build a future. Or tying himself to your money. The silence afterward turned dangerous instantly. Then came the anger. There it is, Brinley said bitterly. You finally said it. I'm trying to protect you. From what happiness? From making decisions too quickly. You know what Nathan says about you? I froze. What does he say? That you confuse love with control? The words hit me harder than they should have. Because I knew exactly where they came from. Not her. Him. He says you don't know how to let me grow up. I stared at the wall silently. Then I asked the question I already feared the answer to. Do you believe that Brinley didn't answer immediately? That silence hurt more than yelling ever could. Finally, she said quietly, sometimes. I felt something crack inside me. Not anger, grief. The grief mothers feel when they realize someone else's voice has become louder than theirs inside their child's heart. Brinley. I whispered, I have never once wanted to control your life. You just always think you know better. Sometimes experience does know better. That's exactly the kind of thing I mean. I closed my eyes again. There was no way to win this conversation anymore. Every warning I gave only pushed her closer to him. And I think Nathan understood that long before I did. A few days later, Brinley sent me photos of houses they were touring together. Large kitchens, modern staircases, expensive neighborhoods. Nathan appeared in every picture smiling like a man already living inside that future. I studied the photos carefully. Then something strange caught my eye. In one image, there was a folder sitting on the kitchen counter of a model home. Inside the partially open folder, I could see Brinley's handwriting. At least I thought I could. I zoomed in. Something felt off. The signature looked stiff, like someone trying too hard to copy confidence. I stared at it for a long time before finally setting my phone down. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe suspicion had poisoned my judgment. Or maybe 30 years of reviewing signatures and financial documents had trained my instincts too well to ignore them now. That night, I made a decision. I would stop arguing, stop warning, stop begging my daughter to see what she refused to see. Because every confrontation only made Nathan stronger. So instead, I became quiet. But silence doesn't mean blindness. And it certainly doesn't mean surrender. While Brinley built her dream life beside Nathan Mercer, I quietly started paying attention to every detail he hoped nobody would notice. The engagement party happened on a cold Saturday evening in November at a country club outside Columbus. Brinley called it small and elegant. There were almost 100 people there. White roses covered every table. Soft piano music floated through the ballroom. Waiters carried trays of champagne, while people laughed too loudly under golden lights designed to make everyone look happier than they really were. I arrived 10 minutes early because I was raised to believe punctuality mattered. Apparently, that made me the first guest there besides the event staff. Brinley rushed toward me the moment I entered. "Mom, thank God," she said breathlessly. "Can you sit at table 7? I blinked. Table 7. It's just temporary until everyone settles. I looked across the room. Nathan's business associates and friends were seated near the front beside the dance floor. I was near the back, beside an elderly couple I didn't know and a distant cousin from Cincinnati I hadn't spoken to in 8 years. For one painful second, I realized exactly what had happened. I had been strategically placed out of the way. Brinley noticed my expression immediately. "Please don't make this a thing tonight," she whispered quickly. I forced a smile. "It's your evening." But deep down, something hurt more than I expected. Not because of the table, because my daughter knew it would hurt me, and did it anyway. The ballroom slowly filled with guests while Nathan moved through the crowd like a politician during campaign season. Shaking hands, laughing warmly, touching shoulders, calling everyone by name. People adored him. Of course they did. Men like Nathan study people the way gamblers study poker tells. They know exactly what version of themselves to present. At one point during dinner, I watched him stand beside Brinley with his hand resting confidently on the small of her back while he spoke to a group of investors. "She's brilliant," he said proudly. "Honestly, I'd be lost without her." Everyone smiled at Brinley admiringly. She looked radiant under the lights. And for a brief moment, I hated myself for doubting him. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe grief and loneliness had turned me suspicious. Maybe I was becoming exactly the bitter older woman Brinley accused me of being. Then I noticed something else. Nathan talked constantly about success, money future plans, expansion opportunities, but never specifics. Never details anyone could verify. Every story floated just above the surface, like smoke. Later that evening, Brinley finally approached my table, holding 2 champagne glasses. "You okay?" she asked carefully. "I'm fine. You look miserable." I'm sitting next to a woman who keeps stealing butter packets from the table. Brinley laughed despite herself. For a second, she looked like my little girl again. Not the defensive stranger she'd slowly become. I know tonight feels weird, she admitted softly. But I just need this to go smoothly. I'm not causing problems. I know. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Nathan really wants everyone to get along. The wording bothered me immediately. Not, I want everyone to get along. Nathan wants. Everything somehow bent toward his comfort now. I looked at her carefully. Are you happy? She smiled automatically. Too automatically. Yes. But before I could say another word, someone called her name from across the room. Nathan. She immediately turned toward him, like gravity. I'll come find you later, she promised. But she never did. About an hour later, I stepped out into the hallway near the restrooms to get away from the noise for a moment. That's when I heard Nathan's voice. Low, sharp, different. I froze near the corner before he noticed me. We need to close this before she changes her mind, he muttered into his phone. My heart stopped. There was a pause while the person on the other end spoke. Nathan exhaled impatiently. No, I said, I'm handling it. Another pause. She trusts me. I gripped the wall beside me. Handling what before she changes her mind about what? Then Nathan laughed softly. Relax. Once the paperwork clears, none of this will matter anyway. Paperwork. Every nerve in my body tightened. I leaned slightly closer, trying to hear more. But suddenly, Nathan turned the corner. Our eyes locked instantly. For the first time since meeting him, his face completely lost its charm. No smile, no warmth, just calculation. Then almost instantly, the pleasant expression returned. Mrs. Shaw, he said smoothly. Everything all right? I forced myself to stay calm. Yes. How long have you been standing there long enough to hear you sound stressed? Nathan smiled faintly. Business complications. What kind of business, boring kinds? His eyes held mine the entire time, measuring me, warning me. I understood the message clearly. Mind your business. Brinley suddenly appeared behind him. There you are, she said brightly. People are looking for us. Us. Nathan slipped effortlessly back into performance mode. Your mother was just checking on me. Brinley smiled gratefully. See, I told you she worries too much. Nathan chuckled softly. It's sweet, honestly. Sweet. That word nearly made me angry, because nothing about what I felt was sweet. It was fear. Raw, growing fear. Back inside the ballroom, speeches began. Nathan gave a perfectly crafted toast about love partnership and building a future together. People wiped tears from their eyes. Even I almost believed him for a second. Then near the end of the speech, something strange happened. A woman standing near the exit caught my attention. Mid-40s. Dark coat. Nervous expression. She wasn't smiling. She was staring directly at Nathan. Not lovingly. Fearfully. The moment Nathan noticed her, his expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. The woman immediately turned and walked out of the ballroom. Fast. Too fast. Nathan excused himself almost immediately afterward. I'll be right back, he whispered to Brinley. I watched him leave through the same side exit the woman had used. Without thinking, I followed. By the time I reached the parking lot, the woman was already getting into her car. Nathan stood beside her driver's side window, speaking harshly through clenched teeth. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard enough. You shouldn't have come here. The woman looked terrified. Nathan noticed me approaching before I got closer. Instantly, he stepped backward and smiled again. That fake, polished smile. The woman drove away immediately. I stopped several feet from him. "Friend of yours?" I asked quietly. Nathan adjusted his jacket calmly. "Old client. She didn't look comfortable. She's going through a divorce." Convenient answer. Always convenient. Then he stepped closer to me. Not threatening. Worse. Controlled. "You know," he said softly, "Brinley loves you very much." I said nothing. "And she's finally happy." Still silence. His smile faded slightly. I'd hate for unnecessary suspicion to damage that. There it was. Not a threat exactly. A warning wrapped in politeness. I looked him directly in the eye. "If you're honest, then questions shouldn't scare you." Nathan smiled one last time. "Questions don't scare me, Mrs. Shaw." Then his eyes hardened coldly. "People who refuse to let things go do." He walked back inside before I could answer. I stood alone in the freezing parking lot with my heart pounding harder than it had in years. Something terrible was happening around my daughter. I could feel it now, like standing near train tracks before hearing the collision. And the worst part, Brinley still looked at Nathan like he was the safest man in the world. After the engagement party, I stopped trying to convince Brinley of anything. That didn't mean I stopped watching. It just meant I learned to do it quietly. December arrived early that year with freezing rain and gray skies that made everything feel heavier than usual. Christmas decorations appeared all over Columbus, but nothing about the season felt warm to me anymore. Because every time my phone rang, I feared hearing my daughter cry. And every time it stayed silent, I feared something even worse. At first, the changes in Brinley's life sounded normal. Stress from wedding planning, work deadlines, mortgage paperwork, adult problems. But then the details started adding up. One evening, she called while driving home. "Nathan thinks we should postpone the honeymoon. Why, he says there's an investment opportunity right now that could double our money in 6 months." I stared out my kitchen window. "What kind of investment? I don't know all the details yet." "Then why would you put money into it?" She sighed immediately. "Mom, please don't start. I'm asking a reasonable question. Nathan understands this stuff. You should understand it too if your money is involved." Silence. Then she changed the subject completely. Another deflection. Another warning sign. A week later, she mentioned casually that Nathan had convinced her to open a shared financial account to simplify wedding expenses. Then came the credit cards. He used mine because his business account was temporarily tied up. Then the loans. "We're just restructuring things temporarily." Every explanation sounded polished. Temporary, strategic, future-focused. That's how smart manipulators speak. They make recklessness sound sophisticated. Still, Brinley defended him constantly. If I questioned anything, she became irritated almost instantly. "He's trying to build a future for us. You're too suspicious. You don't understand modern investing." Eventually, I stopped responding altogether. Not because I agreed, because I realized something painful. Brinley no longer heard concern when I spoke. She only heard criticism. Then, one rainy Thursday afternoon, everything shifted. I was balancing my checkbook at the kitchen table when my phone rang unexpectedly. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored those calls. That day, for some reason, I answered. "Hello." A hesitant woman's voice came through the line. "Is this Evelyn Shaw?" "Yes. My name is Diane Holloway." The name sounded vaguely familiar. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "Do we know each other? I used to work with Greg Holloway at Ridgemont Construction years ago." Suddenly, I remembered. Greg Holloway had been one of the contractors connected to the company where I worked decades earlier. "Oh my goodness," I said softly. "Yes. I remember Greg. He passed away 2 years ago." "I'm so sorry. Thank you." There was an awkward pause. Then Diane lowered her voice. "I almost didn't call. Every instinct in my body sharpened instantly. Call about what another pause. Your daughter is engaged to a man named Nathan Mercer, right? My stomach tightened. How do you know that name? I saw engagement photos online. Ice spread through my chest. What do you know about him? Diane exhaled shakily. I'm not completely sure it's the same man. But a few years ago a man named Nathan Mercer, or maybe Nathan Murphy, I honestly don't know anymore, got involved with a woman from our church. I gripped the edge of the table. What happened? He convinced her to invest in some commercial property deal. Said he had connections. Said he could help secure her retirement. My pulse quickened. And she lost almost everything. I closed my eyes slowly. Was he charged? No. There wasn't enough proof. Most of the paperwork technically looked legal. Of course it did. Men like Nathan survive in gray areas. Diane continued quietly. The woman became depressed afterward, embarrassed. She didn't want people knowing she'd been manipulated. Manipulated, not scammed. Manipulated. There's a difference. One steals your money, the other steals your judgment first. What did this man look like? I asked. Diane described him carefully. Tall, dark hair, confident, smooth talker. Always dressed expensively. Every word tightened the fear inside me. Did he work in investments? I asked. Sometimes. Sometimes. He changed stories constantly, exactly like now. I thanked Diane and hung up slowly. Then I sat motionless at the kitchen table for almost 10 minutes. Part of me wanted to call Brinley immediately, tell her everything, demand she leave him. But another part of me remembered her face the last time I warned her. The eye roll, the frustration, the resentment. If I accused Nathan without proof, Brinley would only run closer to him again. So instead, I started digging quietly. 30 years working in accounting teaches you how to follow patterns, not just money, behavior, contradictions, paper trails. I searched business records online that evening. Mercer Development Group barely existed digitally. No clear office address, no employee listings, minimal public records. Strange for a supposedly successful investment company. Then I searched Nathan Mercer more carefully. Too many results, too few specifics, and then I noticed something odd. A business registration under a similar name connected to Cincinnati listed a Nathan M. Mercer. Different middle initial than the one Brinley once mentioned. Another inconsistency. I wrote everything down in a notebook, dates, company names, addresses. Because instincts are important, but evidence matters more. 3 days later, Brinley came by unexpectedly. For one hopeful moment, I thought maybe she finally wanted to talk honestly. But she seemed distracted the entire visit. Tired, anxious. She paced while drinking coffee. You okay? I asked gently. Just stressed. Wedding stress and work. She rubbed her forehead. Nathan's dealing with a lot too. Of course he was. He always had some crisis requiring patience, money, or loyalty. What kind of stress? I asked carefully. Business pressure. What kind? She immediately became defensive. Why do you always need details? Because details matter. No, she snapped. You look for problems everywhere. I stayed quiet. Brinley sighed heavily. I'm sorry, I'm just overwhelmed. I studied her face carefully. She looked thinner, more exhausted, and something else. Nervous, like someone constantly trying not to disappoint another person. Then her phone buzzed. Nathan. Her entire posture changed instantly. Hey babe, she answered quickly. I pretended not to listen while rinsing dishes, but I heard enough. No, I'm still at my mom's. Pause. I know. Longer pause. I said I know. Her voice sounded smaller now, not angry, careful, like she was trying to avoid upsetting him. When she hung up, she immediately grabbed her coat. I should go. You just got here. Nathan needs help with something. What kind of something? She hesitated, then shrugged. Paperwork. That word again. Paperwork. I watched her leave through the front door while dread crawled deeper into my chest. And for the first time since this all began, I stopped wondering whether Nathan Mercer was dangerous, because deep down, I already knew he was. The real question now was far worse. How much damage had already been done to my daughter before she realized it herself? Brinley lost her job 3 weeks before Christmas. She told me over the phone in a voice so flat it frightened me more than crying would have. They're restructuring the department, she said quietly. Half the marketing team got cut. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table. Oh, honey, I'm fine. No, she wasn't. I could hear it immediately. The exhaustion, the humiliation, the panic she was trying desperately to swallow. When did this happen this morning? Did Nathan come with you? A pause. He was busy. Of course he was. What did he say? That maybe this is an opportunity? I closed my eyes immediately. An opportunity. Nathan turned every disaster into leverage, every weakness into access, every vulnerable moment into control. What kind of opportunity? I asked carefully. He thinks maybe now's the perfect time for us to fully commit to the investment plan? My stomach dropped. What investment plan? He found another commercial property opportunity. Another. There was always another opportunity. Another reason for urgency. Another reason Brinley needed to trust him faster. Brinley, I said slowly, you just lost your income. That's temporary. Exactly. Which means now is not the time to risk money. You don't understand how these things work. There it was again. Nathan's language coming out of my daughter's mouth. Then explain it to me. Silence. Long silence. Finally, she said quietly, I don't know all the details yet. That answer scared me more than anything else. Because Brinley had once been careful, responsible. The kind of woman who researched air fryers for 3 weeks before buying one online. Now she was trusting her financial future to vague explanations and emotional promises. How much money are we talking about? I asked. Another silence. Brinley, we're using most of the townhouse sale. My chest tightened painfully. How much is left after the sale? About $320,000. I nearly stopped breathing, and suddenly I understood why Nathan stayed. Why he pushed commitment so quickly. Why everything felt rushed. $300,000. That wasn't love to him. That was a target. Honey, please listen to me. No, Mom. Please listen to me for once. Her voice cracked. I just lost my job. My entire life feels unstable right now, and you keep acting like the only dangerous thing in my life is Nathan. Because I think it is. Silence. Then came the anger. You know what? She snapped. At least Nathan believes in me. The words hit hard. What does that mean? He doesn't treat me like I'm stupid all the time. I have never called you stupid. You don't have to. I hear it every time you question my decisions. I gripped the edge of the table. I'm questioning him, not you. Well, I'm choosing him. The line went dead. I sat there for a very long time afterward, not moving, not crying, just listening to the terrible silence left behind. Because deep down, I realized something horrifying. Nathan no longer needed to isolate Brinley from me completely. She was doing it herself now. A few days later, I drove to her townhouse without calling first. I know some people would say I shouldn't have, but mothers know when something feels wrong, and everything felt wrong. Snow covered the sidewalks outside her neighborhood. Christmas lights blinked softly from nearby houses, while cold wind rattled dead leaves against the curb. When I knocked, it took almost a full minute before the door opened. Nathan stood there, calm as ever. "Mrs. Shaw. She home, she's resting." "Again. Always resting, always unavailable. I'd like to see her." Nathan hesitated, then smiled politely. "She's had a rough week. I know. That's why I'm here." For 1 second, his jaw tightened. Tiny movement, easy to miss unless you're looking for cracks. Then Brinley's voice came faintly from inside. "Who is it?" "Your mother." A pause. Then slower footsteps approached. When Brinley appeared, my heart nearly broke. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, hair unwashed, sweatshirt hanging loosely on her frame. Not like herself at all. "Mom," she sighed softly. "I brought soup." Her eyes flickered briefly with emotion before hardening again. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." Nathan remained standing beside the doorway, like security. I looked at Brinley carefully. "Can we talk?" "We're kind of busy." Busy? With what neither of them had mentioned actual work in weeks. Then I noticed paperwork spread across the dining room table behind them. Loan documents, bank envelopes, folders. My accounting instincts sharpened instantly. "What's all this?" I asked calmly. Nathan answered before Brinley could. "Investment financing." I ignored him completely. "Brinley." She crossed her arms defensively. "We're restructuring some things." "What things, Mom?" "How much debt are you taking?" Nathan stepped slightly forward. "With respect, Mrs. Shaw, that's private." I looked directly at him. "It becomes my business when my daughter is financially drowning." Brinley's face flushed immediately. "I'm not drowning." "Then show me the paperwork." Nathan laughed softly. "There's that control issue again." I felt anger rise for the first time in months. Not loud anger, cold anger. "You know what I find interesting?" I said quietly. "Every time I ask a direct question, you answer for her." Nathan's smile faded slightly. Brinley immediately stepped between us emotionally, even if not physically. "Stop it." I looked at her. "Honey, no. I'm serious." Her eyes filled suddenly with frustration. "I am so tired of feeling like I have to defend my relationship to you. I'm trying to understand what's happening. What's happening is that my fiancé believes in our future, and how much money has he put into this future himself?" Silence. Instant silence. Brinley looked away. Nathan answered smoothly. "We both contribute in different ways." Not an answer. Again. I glanced toward the paperwork on the table. That's when I saw it. One document partially exposed beneath another folder. A signature line. Brinley Shaw. My stomach dropped instantly. Because the signature didn't look right. I'd spent decades reviewing signatures professionally. Tiny changes matter. Pressure, spacing, stroke direction. And something about this signature felt forced, like imitation instead of instinct. I stared at it too long. Nathan noticed immediately. Without warning, he reached over and casually flipped another folder on top of the papers. Too casually, too quickly. That one movement told me everything. He knew there was something there I shouldn't see. "Honey," I said carefully to Brinley, "did you personally review every document you signed?" Nathan chuckled lightly. "She's not incompetent, Mrs. Shaw. I didn't ask you." Brinley rubbed her forehead. "Can we not do this right now?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. And for the first time, I saw fear hiding underneath her defensiveness. Not fear of me. Fear of everything collapsing if she admitted even one mistake. That's the cruelest part of manipulation. By the time victims begin questioning things, they've already invested too much emotionally to walk away easily. I picked up my purse slowly. I'll leave the soup. Brinley looked guilty suddenly. Mom? But I was already walking toward the door. Not because I gave up, because I understood something important now. Nathan didn't fear confrontation. He knew Brinley would protect him from it. What he feared was observation. Details. Patterns. Evidence. And as I stepped outside into the freezing air, I realized I no longer needed my daughter to believe me yet. I just needed time, because somewhere inside that townhouse, Nathan Mercer was hiding something far uglier than bad investments, and I was finally starting to see the shape of it. The first person I called after leaving Brinley's townhouse was Harold Bennett. If you asked most people in Columbus about Harold, they'd probably describe him as an old retired lawyer who spent too much time feeding birds in the park and complaining about Ohio winters. But I knew better. Harold Bennett had spent 40 years untangling financial disasters most people never saw coming until it was too late. And unlike me, Harold knew exactly how dangerous charming men could be. I need to show you something I told him over the phone. He heard something in my voice immediately. You all right, Evelyn? No. That answer was enough. Harold invited me to his condo the next morning. Snow covered the streets overnight, turning everything white and painfully quiet. I drove carefully through downtown while my stomach twisted harder with every mile. Part of me still hoped I was wrong. Part of me desperately wanted Harold to laugh and tell me I was overreacting. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't normal. Harold opened the door wearing thick reading glasses and an old navy sweater. You look exhausted, he said immediately. I feel exhausted. His condo smelled like coffee and old books. Legal documents covered half the dining table as usual. Harold never truly retired. Men like him simply slow down enough to pretend they have. I handed him my notebook. Every date, every company name, every inconsistency, every strange conversation. Harold adjusted his glasses and began reading silently. The room stayed quiet for nearly 15 minutes, except for pages turning. Finally, he looked up. You've been busy. I needed to organize my thoughts. No, he said carefully. You were building a timeline. That word made me uneasy, because he was right. I sat down across from him. What do you think? Harold leaned back slowly. I think your instincts are probably correct. My chest tightened anyway, hearing someone else say it out loud. And instincts aren't enough legally. I know. But they matter. He tapped the notebook gently. You noticed patterns? Most people wouldn't. I stared into my coffee. He changes stories constantly. Yes. He avoids specifics. Yes. He isolates Brinley every time I get too close. Harold's expression darkened slightly. That part concerns me most. I swallowed hard. Do you think he's dangerous? Harold took his time answering. I think he's strategic. For some reason, that word scared me more. Strategic people plan damage carefully. Emotional people explode. Strategic people calculate. Harold opened his laptop and began searching public business records while I watched anxiously. Mercer Development Group, he muttered. A few seconds passed. Then he frowned. That's odd. What, the business registration exists? Barely. What does that mean? It was created less than 2 years ago. And there's almost no operational footprint. No employee records. No listed office lease. No visible commercial activity. Nothing that matched the successful businessman Nathan pretended to be. Harold clicked through more records silently. Then he stopped. Well now. What, there's another company connected to the same mailing address? I leaned forward. What company? Pierce Property Holdings. The name hit me instantly. Pierce, like the woman from the engagement party. Monica Pierce. Harold kept reading. The business is technically registered under a Monica Pierce. Cold prickled across my arms. She knew him? I whispered. Apparently. Harold clicked again. Interesting. What now? There are multiple short-term LLC filings connected to similar addresses over the last 5 years. Is that illegal? No. But it can be useful for hiding financial movement. I felt sick. Harold looked at me carefully. You need to stay calm. My daughter is financially tied to this man. I understand. No, I snapped quietly. I don't think anyone understands how fast this is happening. Harold's voice softened. Evelyn. I covered my face briefly with my hands. I should have pushed harder. No. I looked up immediately. You pushing harder may have driven her deeper toward him. That was exactly what I feared. Harold sighed heavily. People like Nathan rarely begin with obvious abuse. They begin with emotional dependency. I thought about Brinley defending him constantly, protecting him, excusing him, even when she sounded miserable herself. Harold continued. He made himself the center of her emotional decision-making. And financial. Yes? He paused, which usually means there's escalation coming. The word escalation made my stomach twist. How bad? That depends on how much access she's already given him. I told Harold about the townhouse money. His expression changed immediately. How much over $300,000 after the sale? He went completely silent for several seconds. Then he closed the laptop slowly. That changes things. What do you mean? I mean this may no longer be simple manipulation. I felt suddenly cold despite the heated room. What should I do? Harold studied me carefully before answering. Nothing impulsive. He's taking over her finances, and if you accuse him without evidence, she'll defend him harder. I know, so you need proof. I hated how correct he sounded, because every motherly instinct inside me screamed to drag Brinley out of that townhouse immediately. But instincts alone wouldn't save her now. Facts might. Harold opened another file. Let's verify whether Mercer Development Group has a physical office. An hour later, we drove together across Columbus to the address listed online. The building turned out to be a shipping store. Not an office, not even a shared workspace. Just rows of rented mailboxes behind a counter. I stared through the windshield silently. That's impossible, I whispered. Harold's jaw tightened. No legitimate investment firm operates like this. My pulse hammered painfully. He lied. Yes. Completely. Yes. I felt both vindicated and terrified at the same time. Because now I knew for certain. Nathan Mercer was hiding something serious. And Brinley was already deeply trapped inside whatever game he was playing. On the drive back, snow began falling harder. Harold finally spoke quietly. You need to prepare yourself for something difficult. What your daughter may not believe you, even with evidence. I looked out the passenger window. I know. No, I mean truly prepare yourself. Shame changes people. I frowned. What do you mean? If Brinley realizes she's been manipulated, her first instinct may not be to leave Nathan. I stared at him. It may be to protect herself emotionally by denying it even harder. That possibility hurt more than I expected. Because it sounded exactly like my daughter. Strong, proud, terrified of appearing foolish. By the time Harold dropped me home that evening, darkness had already settled over the neighborhood. Christmas lights blinked softly from nearby houses. Families laughed somewhere down the street. Normal life continued while mine quietly cracked apart. Before leaving, Harold placed a hand gently on my shoulder. You're doing the right thing. It doesn't feel like it. That's because you're a mother. I swallowed hard. What if I'm too late? Harold looked at me carefully. Then he said, the one thing I'll never forget. People like Nathan move fast when they sense control slipping. A chill ran through me instantly, because for the first time, I realized Nathan might already suspect someone was watching him. And if that happened, what would he do to keep Brinley from slipping away too? The first crack in Brinley's faith didn't happen because of me. It happened because Nathan finally got careless. By January, Ohio had settled into that miserable part of winter where everything feels gray and exhausted. Dirty snow lined the streets. The sky looked permanently bruised. Even sunlight seemed cold. And somewhere inside that freezing season, my daughter's perfect life finally began to fracture. I noticed it immediately in her voice. She started calling late at night again, not to talk, just to linger. Sometimes she'd ask random questions. What was Dad like when you first met him? Or do you think people can completely change after marriage? Questions that weren't really questions. Questions people ask when they're searching for reassurance without admitting fear. One night she called close to midnight. I answered instantly. Brinley silence. Then breathing. Uneven breathing. Honey, I can't sleep, she whispered. I sat up straighter in bed. What happened? Nothing. That word again. Nothing. Women say nothing when the truth feels too humiliating to say out loud. Are you all right? A long pause followed. Then she asked quietly, did you ever feel like something was wrong, but you kept trying to convince yourself it wasn't? My heart started pounding. What happened? Nothing serious, she said quickly. Too quickly. I'm probably overthinking. I got out of bed and walked toward the kitchen window. Brinley. Another silence. Then finally, I found messages on Nathan's phone. Ice spread through my chest. What kind of messages? At first, I thought it was business stuff. At first, her breathing trembled again. There was a woman. I closed my eyes slowly. What did the messages say? She called him babe. The word hung painfully between us, and he told me she was an old client. I leaned against the counter. Do you believe him? I don't know. That answer alone told me she didn't. Then came the sentence that broke my heart. I think he deleted part of the conversation before showing me. I swallowed hard. What else? He got angry when I asked questions. How angry, not yelling exactly? That frightened me more, because controlled anger is often more dangerous than explosive anger. He said I was acting paranoid. Of course he did. He said losing my job made me emotionally unstable. I shut my eyes again. Classic manipulation. Turn the victim's insecurity into evidence against them. Brinley, I said carefully, listen to me very closely. But before I could continue, she interrupted. I don't want you to say you were right. The pain in her voice nearly destroyed me, because even now, while frightened and confused, she still feared humiliation more than danger. I'm not interested in being right, I whispered. Silence. Then she quietly started crying. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the exhausted crying of someone trying desperately to hold reality together with shaking hands. I sold my house for him, she whispered. I trusted him. Honey, what if I made the biggest mistake of my life? I wanted to tell her everything. About the fake office, the business inconsistencies, Monica Pierce, the warnings. But something stopped me. Because if I unloaded everything now, she might panic and retreat emotionally again. Instead, I asked softly, what does your gut tell you? She cried harder. That something's wrong. That was the first honest thing she'd admitted in months. But honesty doesn't automatically create courage. The next morning she texted me, Nathan explained everything. We're okay, just like that. The walls went back up again. But now I knew something important. The doubt had started. And once doubt enters a relationship built on manipulation, everything begins unraveling eventually. Over the next 2 weeks, the changes became more obvious. Brinley stopped posting happy engagement photos online, stopped answering friends quickly, stopped sounding excited about the wedding. Yet strangely, Nathan became even more controlling. I noticed it one afternoon when I called her unexpectedly. She answered in a whisper. Hey, why are you whispering? Nathan's sleeping? I glanced at the clock. It was 2 p.m. He's asleep. He was up late, doing what I almost asked. Instead, I said, How are you doing? I'm fine. Lie. Have you eaten today? A pause. I forgot. My chest tightened painfully. Brinley had always stress-eaten, not forgotten to eat entirely. Something was changing inside her emotionally. Then I heard a door shut somewhere in the background. Immediately her voice shifted, brighter. Careful. I should go. Brinley, I'll call you later. Click. The conversation ended instantly. I stared at the phone with growing dread. Because I recognized that tone. Women use that tone around men they're trying not to upset. 3 days later, things got worse. Much worse. She showed up at my house unexpectedly around 7 p.m. The moment I opened the door, I knew something terrible had happened. Brinley looked pale, panicked. Her mascara smudged like she'd been crying in the car. Mom! I pulled her inside immediately. What happened? She shook her head quickly. I can't stay long. Brinley, I just needed... Her voice broke suddenly. I just needed somewhere quiet for 5 minutes. That sentence shattered me. Because home should never become a place your child escapes to only temporarily. I sat her down at the kitchen table while I made tea. For several minutes, she said nothing. Just stared at her hands. Finally, she whispered, I saw another message. I sat slowly across from her. From the same woman, no. My stomach dropped. How many I don't know. She started crying again. There were multiple names. I reached across the table carefully. What exactly did you see? One woman wrote, Does the new bride know about us yet? The room suddenly felt freezing cold. Another bride. Not girlfriend. Not woman. Bride. Pattern. Harold's warning echoed in my mind instantly. Escalation. I kept my voice steady somehow. What did Nathan say? He laughed. That answer stunned me. He laughed. He told me women get obsessed with successful men. Her face twisted painfully. Then he accused me of invading his privacy. Classic reversal. Make the victim feel guilty for discovering betrayal? Brinley wiped her eyes shakily. I don't even recognize myself anymore. Honey, I check his phone when he sleeps. I second-guess everything I say. I feel anxious all the time. I listened silently because finally, my daughter was beginning to hear herself. Then her phone buzzed on the table. Nathan. Her entire body stiffened instantly. Fear. Actual fear. Not physical fear yet. Worse sometimes. Emotional fear. Fear of conflict. Fear of abandonment. Fear of provoking his anger. You don't have to answer, I said softly. But she already grabbed the phone. I have to. She walked into the hallway. I couldn't hear everything. Only pieces. Yes. No, I'm still out. I said I'll come back. Long silence. Then quietly, No, I'm not with anyone. I felt physically sick. She was lying to keep him calm. When she returned to the kitchen, her face looked empty. I should go. No. She blinked at me. What, you don't have to leave immediately. Yes, I do. Why, her eyes filled again. Because if I stay too long, he'll start asking questions. The room went silent. And in that moment, I realized the worst part wasn't the money anymore. It wasn't even the lies. It was that my daughter no longer felt emotionally free inside her own relationship. And deep down, I think she finally knew it too. The night Brinley left my house crying, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me check my phone. Every hour that passed without hearing from her tightened the fear in my chest a little more. At 2:14 in the morning, I almost called her myself. At 3:07, I picked up my keys and nearly drove to her townhouse. At 4:30, I finally sat alone in my kitchen with cold coffee and accepted the truth I had been avoiding for months. My daughter was no longer simply dating the wrong man. She was trapped inside something emotionally dangerous, and I had no idea how far Nathan Mercer was willing to go to keep control over her. The next afternoon, Harold came by after I called him. I told him everything Brinley had said. The messages, the fear, the lying, the emotional manipulation. Harold listened quietly without interrupting. Then he asked one question. Did she sound ready to leave him? I stared at the table. No. Harold sighed softly. That's what I was afraid of. She knows something's wrong. Yes, he said carefully. But knowing and escaping are two different things. I hated how true that sounded. She's embarrassed, I whispered. She's emotionally invested. She's scared. She's financially entangled. Each sentence felt heavier than the last. Then Harold leaned forward. Evelyn, I think Nathan's timeline is accelerating. I frowned. What does that mean? It means manipulative people become more aggressive when they sense emotional control weakening. My stomach tightened. You think he knows she's doubting him? I think men like Nathan always know. That answer chilled me, because it meant Nathan might already be reacting behind the scenes, while Brinley still believed she had time to think. By evening, I couldn't sit still anymore. I drove to Brinley's townhouse around 6 o'clock. Snow melted slowly along the curbs, turning the streets wet and gray. The closer I got to her neighborhood, the harder my heart pounded. I told myself I was only checking on her. But deep down, I think I already knew I was driving toward disaster. When I knocked, no one answered at first. Then suddenly a loud crash came from inside. My chest seized instantly. Brinley footsteps. Quick footsteps. The door finally opened. Nathan stood there. His expression was perfectly calm. Too calm. Mrs. Shaw. I looked past him immediately. Where's Brinley? She's resting. Again. Always resting. Always unavailable. I heard yelling. Nathan smiled lightly. Couples argue. Then let me speak to her. His eyes hardened for half a second. She doesn't want company right now. I didn't ask what you wanted. The smile disappeared completely this time, just for a moment. Then footsteps approached behind him. Brinley appeared slowly in the hallway, and my heart nearly stopped. Her eyes were red, not from sleep, from crying. Mom. I stepped forward immediately. What happened? Nothing. Lie. Why were you crying? She glanced quickly toward Nathan before answering. We just had a disagreement. Nathan spoke smoothly behind her. Wedding stress? I ignored him completely. Brinley, can we talk privately? Before she could answer, Nathan sighed softly. Mrs. Shaw, with respect, showing up unannounced every time there's tension isn't helping. I turned toward him slowly, and isolating her from everyone is. The temperature in the room dropped instantly. Brinley rubbed her forehead. Please stop. Nathan walked calmly toward the kitchen. I'll give you both a minute. But he didn't go far. I could still hear drawers opening, cabinets shutting. He wanted us to know he was nearby. Brinley crossed her arms tightly around herself. You can't keep showing up like this. I was worried. You always think the worst. No, I whispered. I think you're unhappy. Her face cracked for a second. Just a second. Then the walls came back again. We had one argument about what nothing important. Then why are you shaking? She immediately hid her hands. That frightened me more than yelling would have. Brinley? I'm fine. You don't look fine. Her voice suddenly rose. Because I lost my job. Silence crashed through the room. Then instantly she looked ashamed for yelling. I softened my voice. Honey. No, she whispered, tears forming again. You don't understand what it feels like. What to fail. My heart broke hearing that word. You didn't fail. Yes, I did. You lost a job during restructuring. And Nathan's carrying everything right now. Everything. There it was again. Debt disguised as devotion. Dependence disguised as love. Then I noticed something beside the staircase. A large black suitcase, packed. My pulse quickened instantly. Are you going somewhere? Brinley froze. Nathan answered from the kitchen before she could. Short trip. I looked directly at the suitcase. Something about it felt wrong. Too sudden. Too prepared. Then I noticed papers sticking partially out of the side pocket. Bank documents. My instincts screamed immediately. Nathan walked back into the hallway carrying a glass of water. His posture remained relaxed, controlled, calculated. You know, he said calmly, constant suspicion can damage relationships permanently. I stared at him. And manipulation can destroy lives permanently. Brinley closed her eyes. Please stop doing this. Nathan stepped closer to her instantly. Protective, possessive, almost territorial. You don't need stress right now, babe. The way he said it made my skin crawl. Not comforting, managing, like calming someone before they become difficult. Then something caught my eye near the trash can by the kitchen island. Shredded papers, partially torn financial documents. Without thinking, I stepped closer. Nathan moved immediately. Too immediately. Those are just old forms. I crouched slightly anyway. And there, half visible beneath another torn page, a transfer receipt. Large amount, 5 figures at least. The receiving account name was partially ripped off, but I saw enough. The transaction had happened only 2 days earlier. Nathan, I said quietly, where is her money going? Silence. Brinley looked confused immediately. What Nathan smiled slowly. Business restructuring. I looked at Brinley. You didn't know about this transfer. Her face changed instantly. Tiny shift. Tiny panic. Nathan answered quickly. We discussed it already. Brinley hesitated. Too long. And suddenly... Nathan knew I saw it. I watched the calculation happen behind his eyes in real time. He stepped between me and the trash can casually. Not aggressive. Worse. Controlled. Mrs. Shaw. He said softly, I think you should leave. Not asked. Told. For the first time, real fear crawled through me. Because his mask was slipping now. Not fully, but enough. I looked at my daughter one last time. Honey, if you need me, call me. Anytime. I mean that. Brinley looked torn apart inside, but she said nothing. And that silence told me everything. As I walked toward the front door, something inside me shifted permanently. Before I had feared Nathan was manipulating my daughter financially. Now, I feared something much worse. I feared he was preparing to disappear with her life before she fully realized what was happening. And judging by the panic I'd just seen flash across his face, I think Nathan Mercer finally understood that I was getting dangerously close to the truth. 3 days after I found the transfer receipt in Brinley's townhouse, my phone rang at 8:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because that call changed everything. I was standing in my kitchen making toast when I saw Brinley's name flash across the screen. The moment I answered, I knew. Mom. Her voice sounded broken, not emotional, destroyed. I gripped the counter instantly. Brinley, what happened? For a second, all I heard was breathing. Then I think I made a mistake. My knees nearly gave out. Where are you at the bank? Fear shot through me immediately. What bank? The downtown Chase branch. I'm coming. No, I'm already leaving. I grabbed my coat keys, purse, everything at once and drove faster than I had in years through icy morning traffic. The entire way there, my hands shook against the steering wheel. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't just another fight. This was collapse. When I arrived, I spotted Brinley immediately through the bank windows. She sat alone in a chair near one of the offices, staring blankly at the floor while clutching a folder against her chest. She looked hollow, like someone who hadn't slept in days. The moment she saw me, her face crumpled. I rushed toward her. Oh, honey. She stood suddenly and wrapped both arms around me like she was drowning. And for the first time in months, my daughter held on to me instead of pulling away. People think heartbreak is loud. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it sounds like a grown woman whispering into her mother's shoulder. I don't know what happened. I guided her back into the chair carefully. A young bank manager stood nearby, looking deeply uncomfortable. Ma'am, he said gently to me, we've been trying to explain the account activity. My stomach tightened. What activity? Brinley handed me the paperwork silently. The moment I looked down, ice spread through my entire body. Wire transfers, loan activations, account withdrawals. Massive amounts. Large portions of the townhouse money were gone. Not spent gradually, moved. Strategically? Fast. How much? I whispered. Brinley's voice cracked. Almost everything. I closed my eyes briefly. Oh, God. The bank manager spoke carefully. There were signed authorizations attached to several transfers. I looked at Brinley immediately. You signed these? I don't know. That answer terrified me. What do you mean, you don't know? Tears filled her eyes again. Nathan handled most of the paperwork. Every muscle in my body tightened. Did you read what you signed? I thought I did. Thought, not knew. The manager slid another document toward me. We're particularly concerned about this loan authorization. I stared at the signature line. My heart sank instantly. The signature looked like Brinley's. But not fully. The pressure pattern was wrong. Certain letters looked stiff, forced. I had seen enough forged signatures in 30 years of accounting to recognize imitation when I saw it. I looked at Brinley slowly. Did you authorize this? Her face went pale. No. Silence. Heavy silence. Then she whispered, I never agreed to that amount. I felt physically sick. The manager cleared his throat carefully. Your fiancé was listed as an authorized financial contact on several accounts. Of course he was. Because Nathan never built trust emotionally without attaching himself financially too. Where is he now? I asked sharply. Brinley looked down immediately. I don't know. That answer scared me more than anything else. You haven't talked to him? I tried calling all morning. No answer, no explanation, nothing. Then slowly, like someone admitting a crime, Brinley whispered, His phone is disconnected. I stared at her. Disconnected. Not ignored. Disconnected. My chest tightened so painfully I could barely breathe. When did you last see him last night? What happened? She shook her head rapidly, like her brain couldn't process events fast enough. He said he needed to handle a business issue in Cleveland. And you believed him. It came out harsher than I intended. Brinley flinched immediately. Guilt crashed over me. I softened my voice instantly. Honey, I'm sorry. She covered her face with trembling hands. No, you were right. The words shattered something inside me. Not because I wanted to hear them, because of how broken she sounded saying them. I sold my home for him, she whispered. I trusted him with everything. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders. He manipulated you. No, she cried. I ignored everything, every warning, every sign. Shame. That terrible, crushing shame had finally arrived. And shame is dangerous. It makes victims blame themselves instead of the people who exploited them. The bank manager quietly stepped away to give us privacy. Brinley stared blankly at the paperwork again. Then suddenly, her expression changed. Fear. Real fear. My God, what, he has my social security number? My stomach dropped instantly, and copies of all my financial records. She started breathing faster. He could open accounts, loans, credit cards. Okay. I interrupted calmly, even though panic was rising inside me too. We'll handle one thing at a time. But deep down, I understood something horrifying. Nathan hadn't just stolen money. He had built access to Brinley's entire identity. Every document, every account, every vulnerability, carefully, patiently. Like this had never been spontaneous at all. Then Brinley looked up at me with pure devastation in her eyes. There's more. My chest tightened. What her voice dropped to a whisper. I think he was planning to leave already. I said nothing. He packed a suitcase 3 days ago. The suitcase. Of course. I asked him about it, and he said it was business travel. Tears slid down her face again. But last night, he kept asking strange questions. What kind of questions? Whether anyone else had access to my retirement account. Whether my mother was still listed on emergency contacts. Whether I'd told anyone about our finances. My blood ran cold. He was checking for obstacles, checking for witnesses, checking for interference. He knew, I whispered. Brinley looked at me helplessly. What he knew, you were starting to doubt him. That realization visibly shook her. Then another thought hit me instantly. The townhouse. Her eyes widened. What, did you officially close the sale yet? Yes. Where did the money go after closing into the shared account? My heart dropped. Shared account. Exactly where Nathan needed it. Brinley suddenly grabbed my hand desperately. What am I supposed to do now? For a moment, I saw her exactly as she had been at 6 years old after falling off her bicycle. Terrified, ashamed, looking at me like I could still somehow fix the world. And despite everything, despite the lies, the distance, the cruel words, I still wanted to protect her exactly the same way. We start with facts, I said quietly. She cried harder. I'm so stupid. No. Yes, I am. No. I repeated firmly this time. You loved someone who studied how to be trusted. Silence. Then, quietly, you tried to warn me. I swallowed painfully. I know, and I rolled my eyes at you. I looked at my daughter for a very long time before answering. Then I gently squeezed her hand. We'll talk about that later, because right now, there were bigger problems. Nathan Mercer was gone. And judging by the empty accounts, disconnected phone, missing money, and forged paperwork, I feared my daughter was only beginning to discover how completely her life had been dismantled behind her back. I brought Brinley home that afternoon. Not to her townhouse, not to some hotel. Home. The same small brick house where she used to run down the hallway in pajamas on Christmas mornings. The same kitchen where she once sat swinging her legs while I packed her school lunches. The same front porch where she cried after her first heartbreak at 16. Funny how life circles back when everything falls apart. The entire drive from the bank, Brinley barely spoke. She sat curled against the passenger side window, staring blankly at the passing streets while clutching her purse like it contained the last pieces of her life. Maybe it did. When we finally pulled into my driveway, she whispered something so quietly, I almost missed it. I don't deserve this. I turned off the engine slowly, but her eyes stayed fixed forward. You tried to help me. I said nothing, and I treated you like the enemy. Pain moved across her face like a wave. I said horrible things to you. I swallowed hard. Brinley, no. She interrupted softly. Please let me say it. Her voice cracked immediately. I was arrogant. I thought I was smarter than you because I had a better job and a nicer life. Tears filled her eyes again. And now look at me. That last sentence shattered me. Because underneath all the shame and panic, my daughter truly believed she had become unworthy of comfort. I reached for her hand carefully. Listen to me. She shook her head immediately. I sold my house to a man who was probably planning to disappear from the beginning. You didn't know. I should have known. No, I said firmly this time. You trusted someone who studied exactly how to earn trust. She finally looked at me then. Completely broken. I feel so stupid. I squeezed her hand harder. You are not stupid. Yes, I am. No, I repeated quietly. You were lonely. That hit her harder than anything else, because it was true. After years of building her career, proving herself professionally, and pretending she didn't need anyone, Nathan arrived, offering admiration, certainty, and emotional security exactly when she was most vulnerable to it. Manipulators rarely choose confident people at random. They study emotional hunger. And Brinley had been starving for reassurance without realizing it. Once inside the house, she stood awkwardly near the doorway like a guest instead of my daughter. That nearly broke me all over again. You don't have to stand there, I said gently. This is still your home. Her face crumpled instantly. She covered her mouth and started crying again. Not delicate tears, deep, humiliating sobs that seemed pulled from somewhere buried inside her for months. I wrapped my arms around her immediately, and for the first time since all of this began, she let herself collapse completely. I'm sorry, she kept whispering. I'm so sorry. I held her tighter. I know. I should have listened. I know. I rolled my eyes at you like you were embarrassing. I closed my eyes painfully. Yes. She cried harder, hearing me admit it out loud. But you know something, I whispered into her hair? What I never stopped being your mother anyway. That sentence seemed to undo something inside her, because Brinley finally stopped apologizing after that, and simply cried. An hour later, she sat wrapped in one of my old blankets at the kitchen table while I heated soup on the stove. The same chicken noodle soup I made whenever she was sick as a child. Some instincts never disappear from motherhood. Feed them first. Ask questions later. She looked exhausted, fragile, like her body had finally stopped running on adrenaline and crashed completely. I can't believe he's gone, she whispered suddenly. I set the soup bowl down carefully. What was the last thing he said to you? She stared at the steam rising from the bowl. He told me I needed to trust him completely if we were going to build a future together. My chest tightened, and then he kissed me goodnight. Tears filled her eyes again, and this morning he was just gone. Gone. No explanation, no note, nothing. Just destruction left behind. Brinley rubbed her forehead slowly. There were signs. What signs he hated when I questioned things. I stayed quiet. He'd get cold for hours if I challenged him. Her voice grew smaller. Sometimes he'd make me feel guilty for upsetting him. Classic emotional conditioning. Reward obedience, punish discomfort, repeat until the victim polices themselves. He started controlling conversations slowly, she continued. At first, it sounded protective. How? He'd say things like, she swallowed hard. You're emotional right now. Let me handle it. I closed my eyes briefly. He made me feel childish for asking financial questions, she whispered. Because informed people are harder to manipulate? Then Brinley looked at me carefully. You knew, didn't you? I hesitated. I suspected. How early I thought back to the first dinner. The changing stories, the polished answers, the fake warmth. Very early. Pain flashed across her face. And you still stayed. That question hurt more than she realized. Of course I stayed. Even after how awful I was to you. I leaned back slowly. Honey, loving your child isn't a reward system. Silence filled the kitchen. Then she whispered, I thought you were trying to control me. I know. Why didn't you fight harder? That question surprised me. I looked at her carefully. Because every time I pushed, he gained more power. She stared at me silently. I realized eventually that if I forced you to choose between us, I swallowed hard. You were going to choose him. Tears slipped down her face again. I hate that you were right. No, I said softly. You hate that he made you doubt yourself. That hit something deep inside her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then finally, she whispered the question I knew was coming. Do you think he ever loved me at all? I wish I could describe how painful that moment was. Because no mother wants to answer a question like that honestly. But lies wouldn't help her heal now. I think I said carefully that Nathan loved what access to you gave him. Her face fell instantly. The money. Yes. The house. Yes. My credit. Yes. She nodded slowly, like each realization physically hurt. Then she whispered, I don't think he ever saw me as a person. That sentence sat heavily between us. Because victims eventually realize the most painful truth of all, manipulators study people deeply without ever truly caring about them. I reached across the table again. Honey, what, you survived him? Fresh tears filled her eyes, but barely still counts. Silence. Then for the first time all day, Brinley gave the smallest, weakest laugh. And somehow that tiny sound gave me more hope than anything else. Because underneath all the shame, heartbreak, and destruction, my daughter was still there. Wounded badly, but still there. And this time, she was finally ready to stop protecting the man who destroyed her. The strangest part about surviving betrayal is this. At some point, grief turns into clarity. Not immediately, not cleanly, but slowly beneath the crying and humiliation, anger begins waking up. And anger, when guided carefully, can become strength. 3 days after Brinley moved back home, Harold came over with 2 large folders and a look on his face I hadn't seen in years. Focused, sharp, dangerously calm. Brinley sat quietly at the kitchen table, while Harold spread documents across the surface. Bank records, transfer histories, business registrations. Every piece of Nathan's fake world slowly laid bare beneath fluorescent kitchen light. "This is bigger than simple fraud," Harold said quietly. Brinley looked pale instantly. "How bad is it?" Harold adjusted his glasses. "There are signs he's repeated this pattern before." The room went silent. I watched the realization hit my daughter in waves. The fake charm, the rushed commitment, the emotional control, the financial entanglement. Not random. A system. "You mean?" Her voice shook. I wasn't the first Harold exchanged a glance with me. "No," he admitted gently. Brinley closed her eyes. For a moment I thought she might cry again. Instead, something colder settled across her face, humiliation transforming into fury. "He planned this," she whispered. "Yes," Harold answered quietly, "and I let him." "No," I interrupted immediately. "He manipulated you." But I ignored every warning sign. Harold leaned forward carefully. "Brinley intelligent people get manipulated every day." She stared at him bitterly. "Doesn't feel that way." "That's because shame isolates victims." That sentence seemed to hit her hard. Harold continued. "Manipulators rely on two things, emotional dependency and silence." Brinley looked down. I gave him both. The kitchen fell quiet again. Then Harold opened another folder. "There's something else." My stomach tightened instantly. What we tracked one of the receiving accounts from the wire transfers. I held my breath. It connects to a previous civil complaint filed in Indiana 3 years ago. Brinley looked confused. Against Nathan. Against a man using the name Nathan M. Mercer. My pulse quickened. What happened? Harold's expression darkened. A woman accused him of convincing her to refinance property for a fake commercial development project. The room suddenly felt freezing cold. "How much did she lose?" I asked quietly. "Almost 400,000. Brinley covered her mouth. "Oh my God." Harold nodded grimly. The case never fully moved forward. Most likely due to lack of hard evidence, because Nathan operated in gray zones. Not outright theft at first. Consent manipulated slowly until victims questioned themselves instead of him. Then Harold slid another page across the table. "This woman." Brinley stared down at the photograph, then suddenly froze. "I know her." I leaned closer. Monica Pierce. The woman from the engagement party. The woman in the parking lot. Fear crawled up my spine instantly. "She was there," Brinley whispered. "At our engagement party." I nodded slowly. She looked terrified of him. Brinley stared at the photo in horror. "Oh my God." Then suddenly anger flashed across her face. "He brought me around one of his victims." "Yes," Harold said carefully, possibly because he believed she wouldn't speak. "But she came anyway," I whispered. Brinley looked up sharply. "Why would she do that?" None of us answered immediately, because deep down, we all knew. Maybe Monica had been trying to warn someone too, just like I had. Harold finally spoke again. "We may have one advantage." What Brinley asked. "Nathan probably believes you're still emotionally vulnerable enough to manipulate." Brinley frowned. "You think he'll contact me? I'd bet on it. Why?" "Because disappearing completely leaves legal exposure. Manipulators often return first to regain control of the narrative." I understood immediately. Nathan would try to confuse her again, charm her, blame stress, promise explanations, pull her emotionally back under his influence before consequences reached him. And for the first time since all of this began, Brinley looked angry instead of heartbroken. "What do we do?" Harold leaned back calmly. "We let him think he still has power. 2 days later, Nathan finally contacted her. Not by phone, by text. Simple, carefully written. Exactly the kind of message designed to trigger guilt instead of suspicion. I'm sorry things got overwhelming. We need to talk privately. There are things you don't understand yet. Classic Nathan. No accountability, no direct explanation, only mystery and emotional bait. Brinley stared at the message while sitting beside me on the couch. I hate that part of me still wants answers. That's normal, I said softly. No, she whispered. It's pathetic. It's human. Harold instructed her carefully before she replied. Keep him talking. Stay calm. Don't accuse too early, and most importantly, get him in person. Nathan suggested meeting at a cafe outside Columbus 2 days later. Public place? Neutral ground? Probably because he still believed he could control the conversation. What he didn't know was that Harold had already contacted both the bank investigator and Monica Pierce. And for the first time, Nathan Mercer was walking into a situation he hadn't fully designed himself. The morning of the meeting, Brinley looked physically ill. You don't have to do this, I told her quietly while she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. Yes, I do. You already escaped him. No, she whispered. I survived him. She turned toward me slowly. But I need to stop being afraid of him too. That sentence nearly made me cry, because my daughter finally sounded like herself again. Strong. Not arrogant, not defensive, just strong. At noon, we arrived at the cafe. Harold sat separately near the back with paperwork hidden inside a leather folder. I remained 2 tables away wearing sunglasses I absolutely did not need in January. Brinley sat alone near the window waiting. At exactly 12:14, Nathan walked in, and somehow, he still looked calm. Perfect coat, perfect posture, perfect smile, like a man arriving for lunch instead of confrontation. The moment he saw Brinley, his face softened instantly. Performance mode. There you are, he said warmly. I watched my daughter tense immediately. Trauma remembers faster than logic. Nathan sat down across from her smoothly. I've been worried about you. Worried. The audacity nearly made my hands shake. Brinley kept her voice steady somehow. You disappeared. Nathan sighed dramatically. I needed space to fix things. What things? Business complications. Always vague. Always impossible to pin down directly. Then Nathan reached across the table gently. I know your mother has been influencing you. There it was. Blame the protector. Separate the victim again. But this time Brinley didn't lower her eyes. She was trying to help me. Nathan paused. Only briefly, but enough. Then came the charm again. Babe, you're overwhelmed. Losing your job changed everything emotionally. I watched my daughter's jaw tighten. No tears now. Only anger. You forged loan paperwork? Nathan blinked slowly. No. You transferred money without explaining where it went. Business restructuring. You lied about your companies. Nathan leaned closer carefully. You're confused right now. Classic. Make reality feel unstable. But then Nathan made a mistake. A small one. The kind arrogant people make when they think they're smarter than everyone else. He lowered his voice and muttered, You signed enough documents that nobody's going to believe you didn't approve things. Silence. Complete silence. My pulse exploded instantly, because there it was, not full confession, but close enough, and judging by the look on Harold's face across the room. Nathan had just stepped directly into the trap himself. The moment Nathan realized he had said too much, I watched the entire atmosphere around the cafe table change. His posture stiffened. Not dramatically, just enough. Like a man suddenly aware the floor beneath him might not be stable anymore. Brinley noticed it too. For months, she had second-guessed herself every time something felt wrong. Now, she was finally watching him instead of defending him. And once you truly see someone manipulative for the first time, their mask becomes impossible to unsee. Nathan leaned back slowly and forced a small laugh. "You're twisting my words." Brinley didn't blink. "Am I? You signed documents willingly. You handled almost everything because you asked me to help." His voice remained calm, but I could hear irritation slipping underneath now. No more warmth. No more patient fiancé performance. Just damage control. Brinley's hands trembled slightly on the table, but her voice stayed steady. "You moved money without explaining where it was going." Nathan sighed heavily like an exhausted parent dealing with a difficult child. "Brinley, we discussed investment restructuring multiple times." "You mean the fake companies?" There it was. Direct accusation. Nathan's eyes sharpened immediately. "What fake companies?" The office address was a mailbox store. Silence. For the first time since meeting him, Nathan looked genuinely caught off guard. Only for a second, but enough. Then his expression hardened. "So your mother hired someone to investigate me." Not denial, not outrage. Deflection. Blame. Exactly what Harold predicted. Brinley stared at him. "You lied to me?" Nathan leaned closer again, lowering his voice carefully. "You're emotional right now. The old tactic. The old control. Except this time, it didn't work." "No," Brinley said quietly. "I'm finally paying attention." Something dangerous flickered across Nathan's face then. Not panic. Anger. Cold anger. The kind that had probably always existed underneath the charm. Across the cafe, I saw Harold slowly close the folder on his lap. He had what he needed, but emotionally, this part mattered even more, because Brinley needed to confront Nathan herself, not as a frightened victim, as someone finally reclaiming reality. Nathan's voice dropped lower. "You know what your problem is?" Brinley didn't answer. "You've always needed someone to blame whenever life disappoints you." I felt my hands tighten around my coffee cup instantly. There it was. Cruelty. Manipulators become vicious the moment control slips. Brinley looked stunned for half a second, then hurt, then furious. "You emptied my accounts. I invested our money. You disappeared. I needed space. You disconnected your phone." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "No," Brinley whispered. "I think I underreacted for months." That sentence hit him. I saw it immediately, because manipulators survive by keeping victims confused. The moment clarity arrives, their power weakens fast. Nathan tried a different strategy instantly. His face softened again. "Babe." The word sounded disgusting now. "You've been under pressure since losing your job. Your mother has filled your head with paranoia." Brinley stared at him silently, and then slowly, she did something I never thought I would see. She laughed, not happily, not kindly. The laugh of someone finally realizing how absurd the lies sound once fear disappears. "Oh my God," she whispered. "You really think this still works on me?" Nathan's expression froze. Then another voice spoke from behind him. "It worked on me too." Nathan turned instantly. So did Brinley. Monica Pierce stood near the entrance wearing a long dark coat, her face pale but determined. For the first time since I'd seen her, she no longer looked afraid. Nathan stood abruptly. "What the hell is this?" Monica ignored him completely and looked directly at Brinley. "I'm sorry I didn't warn you sooner." The cafe fell eerily quiet around them. Brinley stared at her in shock. "You know him." Monica gave a bitter smile. "I knew a version of him." Nathan grabbed his coat immediately. "I'm leaving." But Harold was already standing beside the table. "I wouldn't recommend that." Nathan looked at him coldly. "And who exactly are you?" "Someone who spent 40 years dealing with financial fraud." Silence. Pure silence. Nathan's confidence cracked visibly for the first time. "Not much, just enough." Harold opened the folder calmly. "We've documented the shell companies." Nathan said nothing. The wire transfers. Silence. The false business addresses. Nathan's jaw tightened. The forged authorization concerns. Still silence. Then finally, Nathan looked directly at Brinley again. And what he said next showed exactly who he truly was. "You really let your mother destroy your life like this. Not apology, not regret, only blame. Because men like Nathan never truly see other people as human beings, only assets, obstacles, or tools." Brinley stared at him with tears gathering in her eyes again. But this time, they weren't tears of confusion. They were grief. The grief of realizing the person you loved never really existed. "You destroyed my life," she whispered. Nathan scoffed quietly. "You handed it over willingly." The cruelty of that sentence stunned even me. Monica closed her eyes painfully, because she had heard it before, too. Then Brinley slowly stood up, and for the first time in months, she looked strong again. Not emotionally numb, not defensive. Strong. "No," she said calmly. "I trusted someone who pretended to love me." Nathan stared at her coldly. "You're making a huge mistake." Brinley shook her head. "No. The mistake was thinking you cared about anyone except yourself." Something in Nathan's face darkened instantly. The performance was over now. No smile, no charm, no warmth, just resentment. Then he looked directly at me for the first time since entering the cafe. And suddenly, I understood something horrifying. Nathan hated me because I saw him too early. Not because I interfered, because I recognized him. "You think you won," he said quietly. I met his stare evenly. This was never about winning. He gave a humorless laugh. "That's funny coming from a controlling mother." Before I could answer, Brinley spoke instead. And hearing her defend me after everything nearly broke my heart. "She wasn't controlling," Brinley said firmly. Nathan turned toward her sharply. "She tried to protect me." Silence. "You isolated me from her because you knew she could see through you?" Nathan's expression hardened further. "She manipulated you against me." "No," Brinley whispered. "You just couldn't stand the one person I trusted more than you." That sentence finally landed. Because Nathan realized something in that moment. He no longer controlled the story. The bank investigator arrived 20 minutes later. Not police, not dramatic handcuffs. Real life rarely works that way, but official enough, serious enough. Questions began immediately regarding the transfers, the account authorizations, and the company registrations. Nathan remained calm externally, but I saw it, the tiny cracks, the twitching jaw, the shifting eyes, the arrogance finally colliding with consequences. As he stood to leave with the investigator, Nathan glanced back one last time at Brinley, and for a split second, I think he genuinely expected her to hesitate, to defend him, to soften. Instead, my daughter simply looked away. That hurt him more than anger ever could. After he left, silence settled over the cafe. Brinley sat back down slowly, like her body had suddenly forgotten how to hold itself upright. Monica quietly reached across the table. He'll try to make you feel ashamed, she said softly. Don't let him. Brinley nodded weakly. I already do. Monica's eyes filled with sadness. I know. Then she looked toward me. You never stopped fighting for her. I swallowed hard. I almost gave up. No, Monica said gently. You adapted. That word stayed with me. Because maybe she was right. I hadn't saved my daughter by forcing her to obey me. I saved her by staying close enough for her to return when the illusion finally shattered. And sitting there beside Brinley, while winter sunlight faded through the cafe windows, I realized something important. The real victory wasn't exposing Nathan Mercer. It was that my daughter no longer looked at me with resentment in her eyes. She looked at me like home again. Spring arrived slowly that year. Not dramatically, not all at once. The snow melted in uneven patches across the yard. Rain replaced ice. Small green shoots appeared beside the porch steps almost before I noticed them. Healing felt like that too. Slow, uneven, quiet. 3 months after Nathan Mercer disappeared from Brinley's life, my daughter still woke up some mornings looking like she had forgotten where she was. Trauma does that, especially betrayal trauma. Your mind understands the danger is over long before your nervous system believes it. The legal process moved slowly. The bank fraud investigation remained active. Harold helped Brinley file disputes against several fraudulent transactions, and there were signs she might eventually recover part of the money. But not all of it. Some losses never fully return, financially or emotionally. At first, Brinley barely left the house. She slept late, avoided mirrors, jumped every time her phone buzzed. Some days she seemed furious at Nathan. Other days she blamed herself so harshly I had to leave the room just to cry privately afterward. One evening, I found her sitting alone at the kitchen table, staring at old engagement photos on her laptop. She quickly closed it when she saw me. I should delete these. I sat down beside her quietly. You don't have to decide tonight. They make me feel sick. I understood that feeling, because those photos contained a woman who no longer existed. The version of Brinley who believed love meant proving loyalty at all costs. After a long silence, she whispered, "How did you survive Dad dying?" The question surprised me. I don't know if I survived it well. You did. I looked down at my tea. No, I just kept moving because you needed me to. Brinley swallowed hard. I haven't needed you in a long time. That's not true. Yes, it is. Her voice cracked softly. I spent years trying to prove I didn't. That sentence stayed with me for days afterward, because I realized something painful. Brinley's pride had never truly been about success. It had been fear. Fear of dependency. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of ending up abandoned like I was after my husband died. Nathan simply found those fears and used them expertly. By April, small changes began happening. Brinley started therapy twice a week. At first, she hated it. I sound pathetic talking about this out loud. You sound human, I told her. She slowly rebuilt routines too. Morning coffee, walks around the neighborhood, job applications, phone calls with old friends she'd isolated herself from during the relationship. Tiny steps, but real ones. One Saturday afternoon, I walked into the garage and found her opening old storage boxes. What are you doing? She smiled faintly. Looking for my college textbooks. Why I'm thinking about taking a certification course. Hope. Small, fragile, but finally there. Then came something I never expected. One evening, while we cooked dinner together, Brinley suddenly said, I understand now. I glanced at her carefully. Whoa, why you got so quiet near the end? The knife paused in my hand. She continued chopping vegetables slowly. You stopped arguing with me. I nodded. At the time, I thought you gave up on me. My throat tightened immediately. I never gave up on you. I know that now. She looked up at me then. You realize the more you pushed, the more I defended him. Tears burned unexpectedly behind my eyes. Yes. Brinley nodded slowly. He used every disagreement between us to make himself look safer. Exactly. That was exactly what happened. And hearing her finally say it herself felt almost surreal. She leaned against the counter quietly. You know what scares me most? What that part of me still misses him sometimes? I set the knife down immediately. Honey, that doesn't mean you want him back. She looked relieved hearing that. Trauma bonds are complicated, I continued gently. Your brain connected him to safety before it connected him to pain. She stared at the floor silently. I hate that he still takes up space in my mind. He probably will for a while. That truth hurt both of us. But healing built on honesty lasts longer than healing built on pretending. Later that night, Brinley sat beside me on the back porch while rain tapped softly against the roof. The world smelled like wet earth and spring flowers. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then suddenly, she laughed quietly. What I just remembered, something embarrassing. That narrows nothing down. She smiled for real this time. When I was 14, you told me not to date Tyler Grayson because he looked like trouble. I burst out laughing immediately. He got arrested for stealing motorcycles 2 years later. Brinley shook her head. You were right about literally everything. Not everything. Most things. Then her smile faded slowly. I hated when you gave advice. I noticed. She winced. I used to think your warnings meant you didn't trust me. I looked out at the rain. No. My warnings meant I trusted the world less than you did. That silence afterward felt peaceful instead of painful for the first time in a long while. Then Brinley reached over suddenly and took my hand. A simple gesture. But it nearly broke my heart, because months earlier, she could barely tolerate my presence without frustration. Now she held on to me willingly. You know what the worst part is? She asked softly. What I thought admitting you were right would destroy me. I squeezed her hand gently, and she smiled sadly. It actually saved me. Tears filled my eyes instantly. Not dramatic tears, just quiet ones. The kind mothers cry when their child finally comes home emotionally after being gone too long. A few weeks later, Brinley got a new job offer from a smaller marketing firm outside downtown Columbus. The salary wasn't as high as before. The office wasn't glamorous. But when she accepted the position, she smiled with genuine pride instead of desperate performance. That mattered more. One evening, before her first day, she stood in the hallway, adjusting her coat nervously. You think I'll be okay? I smiled softly. I think you already are. She rolled her eyes automatically, then suddenly froze. We both stared at each other, and for one horrifying second she looked terrified she had hurt me again. But then I started laughing. Real laughing. The kind that loosens years of tension. Brinley laughed too until tears filled both our eyes. I can't believe I used to do that constantly, she groaned. You absolutely did. I'm sorry. I know. She shook her head, smiling weakly. I don't think I'll ever hear advice from you the same way again. I looked at my daughter carefully then. Stronger now. Softer too. Not because suffering made her weak, because surviving manipulation had finally taught her the difference between control and love. And as we stood there laughing quietly in the hallway of that old brick house, I realized something beautiful. Nathan Mercer took my daughter's money. He took her confidence. He nearly took her future. But he failed to take the one thing that mattered most in the end. He failed to take her way back home. Sometimes the hardest lesson in life is that love cannot protect someone who refuses to listen. A mother's warning may sound old-fashioned controlling or too cautious in the moment, but often it comes from years of pain experience and quiet observation. Evelyn did not want to win an argument with Brinley. She did not want to prove that she was smarter or stronger. She only wanted her daughter to be safe. But sometimes the people we love have to walk close enough to the fire before they finally believe it can burn them. And maybe that is one of the most painful parts of motherhood, knowing the truth, seeing the danger, and still having to wait until your child is ready to see it too. Brinley's story reminds us that manipulation rarely begins with cruelty. It often begins with charm, attention, promises, and the feeling that someone finally understands us. That is why we must pay attention not only to how someone treats us when life is easy, but how they respond when we ask questions, set boundaries, or disagree. Real love does not punish you for asking for clarity. Real love does not isolate you from your family. Real love does not make you feel small for wanting the truth. And most importantly, real family does not close the door forever, just because someone made a painful mistake. Sometimes healing begins with one phone call, one apology, one bowl of soup, and one hand reaching across the table. If this story touched your heart, please tell me in the comments, have you ever tried to warn someone you loved, but they didn't listen until it was too late? Do you think Evelyn was right to stay silent, or should she have fought harder? I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially from mothers, daughters, and anyone who has ever had to rebuild trust after pain. Please like this video, subscribe for more emotional family stories, and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now.